Good morning, everybody. This is Karen Almquist. I'm starting the CALPADS information meeting. We have here today Paula Mishima and Martha Friedrich. We have a couple of moderators who are going to be answering questions in the Q&A. You can call in with the number that we put in the Q&A, but we're going to go ahead and get started. Here we go. The presentation right now can be downloaded at the link that you see. We will be transcribing the presentation as well and loading that onto our web page so that everybody can access that. That should be available within a month or so. Here's our agenda. We're going to go over the agenda. We're going to do some updates from the CDE, and we'll do a CALPADS support update. On top of that, we'll also talk about our next meeting, our next CIM meeting. In order to ask a question, go ahead and click on the Q&A icon to open the Q&A box. In the Send To drop-down, select Presenter and type your question in the Q&A box and press Send. We will respond to questions during the meeting as time permits, and we'll address unanswered questions in an upcoming flash or in additions to the FAQs as appropriate. And if your question is not answered during the CIM, go ahead and submit a service ticket and we'll get to it through the ticket process. Okay, we're going to get started with the CDE update. We'll cover the 16-17 end-of-year submission deadlines, general updates, assessment reminders, and the accountability updates. For the 16-17 fall submissions, we wanted to congratulate everybody who submitted. We had 100% of the LEAs submit for Fall 1, 99.7% of the LEAs submitted for Fall 2. And the CE, we recognize that the data the LEAs submit to CALPADS have become a key to many critical functions, and that we're putting more responsibility and workload on those who work on CALPADS. So we do recognize all the hard work that you do. We're working hard to convey the importance of the data to your superintendents through letters and flashes as well. So we are attempting to make sure that everybody understands how important this data is. The 16-17 end-of-year submission will open on May 15th. This year, the certification deadline will be July 31st. And the end of our amendment window for end-of-year will be August 11th. So it will be a shorter amendment window this year so that we can get the data in a little bit earlier. We are working on some system updates. We are working to stabilize the system to improve performance and user experience. Specifically in 17-18, the CDE has prioritized working on the following implementation for the fall of 2018. The enhancement of the security model to enable CALPADS to more flexibly roll up data to meet accountability requirements and to provide for view-only functionality. We'll be updating the CALPADS user interface, streamlining the screens, and improving the performance of the post process. Another change that we have is to the CALPADS LEA administrator authorization process. And this is in order to implement best practices and enhance the overall security for authorizing CALPADS administrators. From today through August 11th, if a CALPADS administrator application is over a year old, a new application is required upon the LEA administrator account password reset or expiration. This change will continue until the end-of-year amendment window closes on August 11th. And after August 11th, any LEA administrator account not renewed during the 2017 year up to that point will be disabled. The LEA will be required to submit a new application at that time. Another process, the new process for 18-19 following the close of the 2018 end-of-year submission, that we're going to have the CALPADS LEA Administrator account renewed annually. That means that we'll have an application that must be signed by the LEA Administrator and Superintendent or Charter School Administrator, submitted each year following the close of the end-of-year submission. And that should say the end-of-year amendment submission. Upon receipt of a new application, accounts will then be re-enabled. Change in superintendent and charter school administrators or LEA administrators that occur during the school year, we're going to ask for a new application if you have a new charter school or LEA administrator that occurs during the year, so we can have a new signature on file with us here. If you have a new superintendent that comes in, we will request a new application, but it won't affect the LEA administrator's login credentials. Additional security and privacy measures. Beginning in 17-18, all users must accept an initial security and privacy user agreement upon login to the CALPADS system. The user agreement has standard privacy and security language that stipulates users will not use CALPADS data inappropriately. It'll say something along the lines of click here to accept confidentiality and security agreements, and that only occurs once per year. Users will not be allowed into the system until they accept that new confidentiality and security agreement that will pop up. But again, it only happens once during the year, and it will happen after the end of year closes. And just as a reminder, all LEAs and LEA admins should have in place appropriate security and privacy policies for all local CALPADS users. For programmatic updates for 17-18, direct certification results for all LEAs will include reduced price meals starting in July of 2017. There'll be new CTE course codes for all pathways. Certification of one-year graduates and drops will occur in fall 2017. And in 17-18, grads will occur as part of the end of year in 2018. In addition, four-year graduate cohort report will be available in CALPADS tentatively for 16-17 and 17-18 cohorts.
Karen, before you go on, could you just give a little bit more explanation as to why we're going to be requiring a new application each year, and also how do they know if someone is, how do they get one if they know their application is going to expire in a few days?
We're going to be sending out a new application. We had to revamp the one that we had for LEA administrators. The reason that we are having a new application is we just wanted to make sure that we had one at least once a year. That was standard sort of privacy and security practice to have a new signature from the superintendent once a year. So we will be sending out the new applications. And once you have one for the year, you're fine. This initial year, if you filled out an application for an LEA admin between January and August, we will not make you do another one until at the end of year 2018. So it's only those who didn't get a new application done and to us between January and August of 2017 whom will be required to send in a new one after August 2017. I hope that answers that. In 1920, for programmatic updates, the system changes in 18-19 will help prepare for the CAASPP to CALPADS transition, which is targeted right now for 2019-2020. We also have some direct certification workshops that are available. The direct cert workshop location and times are posted right here on this slide for Fresno, Redding, Alameda, Natomas, and Corona Norco. You can look at CALPADS/124 for registration instructions. We're also going to have some CTE course mapping workshops available June 27th and 29th in Southern California, in Orange County and LA County Office of Ed. We'll have more details for those, and we'll announce that either in a flash or in a listserv email that goes out. We also have right now CASEMIS to CALPADS transition workshops available. The first one coming up is April 26th, so next week in San Pablo, the 28th and May 1st in Oroville and San Diego. You can register at the link that's on this slide. Space is limited, but we will continue to offer these workshops the entire time we're working on the CASEMIS to CALPADS transition. So if you can't get into one of these, rest assured we'll be doing more of them over the next couple of years. All right, assessments. All right, CELT data. The 15-16 CELT data are available in CALPADS. At this time, however, a defect is preventing LEAs from seeing the scores of students that are tested in other LEAs. The 16-17 CELT data will be available late spring, so we're hoping in May or June it will be available in the CALPADS system. Loading CAASPP results into CALPADS is still planned, but a lower priority right now given the current availability of test results in TOMS, which is maintained by ETS. What enrollments are sent to TOMS? This is a question we get pretty often. CDE sends most current primary and short-term enrollments each Sunday through Thursday night. So if a student is concurrently enrolled, CALPADS sends the enrollment with the most recent start date. A concurrent enrollment anomaly does not need to be resolved for a student to test unless the latter LEA enrolled the student in error. And just as a reminder, a student must have a current enrollment in CALPADS to access the interim assessments. The CALPADS data that's sent to TOMS is the most current demographic data from CALPADS. It's sent daily to ETS for loading into TOMS. A student must have an open special education or 504 accommodation plan program record in order to load accommodations. All the student data displayed on the TOMS student demographic screen comes from CALPADS. TOMS does include the ability to download the student demographic data that can then be aggregated and used to identify any data issues. A summary display of the demographic data within TOMS is planned. So when should LEAs exit students from CALPADS, and what student data are used in reports? For the 2017 summative testing, ETS freezes the demographic data it receives from CALPADS at the end of the LEA's testing window, or when the student exits, whichever comes first, and uses this particular data for reports in TOMS, the online reporting system, which is ORS, and on the public website. This means for students who leave during a selected testing window, LEAs can and should exit their students when the student exits. LEAs should not wait until the end of the testing window. And students who complete the school year at the school should be exited at the end of the school year. Once again, as a reminder, in order to ensure accurate reporting, it is important that LEAs keep CALPADS up to date with student demographic and program data. During the testing window, LEAs should review subgroup data available in TOMS and correct any data prior to the end of their testing window. If you have any technical questions or need somebody to contact, you should contact the California Technical Assistance Center at the number and email listed. And you can also go on a couple of links that we have included for CAASPP in order to get some additional information. If you have policy or program questions, you can contact Accommodations Test Policy Testing Irregularities at the CAASPP office. And again, here's the information for the CAASPP office. Okay. And we have the accountability update coming up.
Before we go there, this is Martha. We were getting a few questions about the application process. It's going to be documented, and we'll communicate further the actual details of how you go about sending the application, where you send it, how you get it, et cetera. So we'll be following up with a communication to the field regarding that new process.
Okay, good morning, everyone. This is Paula, and we're kind of doing a handoff here. So what I was going to do today is kind of update you on what we talked about at the last CIM in regards to accountability. We know a little bit more, and things are getting a little bit more fleshed out. The California's new accountability system is now being kind of called the California School Dashboard, and it's kind of being branded as just being the dashboard. So whenever you see the dashboard, that really indicates California's new accountability system. It replaces the old API. So the main purpose of this dashboard is to hold both districts and schools accountable and to foster continuous improvement. The dashboard will contain a set of performance measures for districts and schools that will be displayed for the whole district and school, as well as for the different student groups, on a set of state measures. And the idea behind the dashboard really is to quickly see in what areas improvement can be had. There are also local indicators, but those are completely kind of local. They're reported at the district and county level only. So in March, you all probably have seen the release of the first dashboard that's accessible from CDE's website. If you haven't checked it out, you should probably go and check that out. This first release was really meant to be just to provide schools and districts and the public an introduction to the new system. A lot of the data we acknowledge was kind of based on older data. In the future, the dashboard will be released annually in November, beginning this November. Okay, so you should look at what's there now just to kind of get an idea of what it's like, but starting in November, it will be released kind of for real. So, the dashboard will be most effective informing LEAs in terms of their LCAPs and planning and so forth if it includes the most recent data that's been submitted to the state via CALPADS or any other source. Therefore, it's kind of a balancing act of putting data submission deadlines, balancing that with the practical realities that you all face given your school calendars, availability of staff when they leave for summer, et cetera, and the need for quality data. So we understand completely the challenges you all face in trying to get especially the end-of-year data in and at the end of the year. But we're faced with this reality of also needing to put the performance indicators out there so that schools and districts can use that for their LCAP planning, in hopes of continuing to improve in the different areas. So when you see us moving the deadlines a little bit more aggressively, that's the main motivation. The State Board of Education has expressed a desire, as a lot of advocates and others, to see more recent data in the performance metrics. And, you know, we also, just as an aside, you know, as Karen talked about some of the things we're going to be working on in the course of this year in hopes of rolling out in the fall of 2018, we recognize that in order to help you all, we need to make sure CALPADS is performing the best that it can. So we are trying to, as she said, stabilize it and do some other improvements to have the system perform the way it should perform so you all can more easily get your data in and see it. So going back to the dashboard, the main performance indicators that the State Board of Education has adopted for the dashboard are listed here. You can see on the left-hand side the performance indicator, and on the right-hand side the primary data source that will be used to calculate that indicator. So we will be going over each of these in more detail, but this gives you all in one place an idea as to which data is important for what reason. The other thing to understand about the performance indicators is that it's based on status and change. Status is where the school is today, based on the most recent data submitted. Change is the progress the school has made from one year to the next. Therefore, in order to have a performance indicator, you will always need at least 2 years' worth of data. Both status and change have 5 different levels. You'll see very high, high, medium, low, and very low, and each of those status levels are associated with a color. Change is described as either increase significantly, increase, maintain. You can see the different ones there. Status and change are then combined to produce a performance category, which are displayed in colors and pie segments, which we will see in the next slide. So if you look at the slide and think about it, you'll kind of understand how this all works. But what it shows, for example, is that if you are very high in a certain performance indicator, say, you know, an achievement, and you also increased a lot from one year to the next, your performance level would be green. You could be very low in your status, but you made huge change, in which case you would be yellow, not red. So that's why taking both change in your status into account comes together to a performance level. The other thing to know about the performance level, because this is something everybody says, oh, they didn't really understand this at first, but the colors and the pies are the same. So blue is, you know, the highest, and all the pie segments are filled in. Red is the lowest, and only one pie segment is filled in. There will never be all the pie segments filled in for red. The one pie segment indicates red or low. The reason it's done this way is so that if you printed this out in black and white, or if you're colorblind, you can still understand what the different performance levels are. So what this will look like, and so for those of you who have already looked at your dashboard for your school, this is an example of what you will see. You will see each of the state indicators down on the left, and basically the performance indicator, if there is one, for all students. If you were to click on the detailed or the student group report, you will see the same thing, but for each of the student groups. So what I'm going to do now is just quickly talk about each of these in this order: chronic absenteeism, suspension, English learner progress, etc., to talk a little bit more about the data that will be used to calculate those performance indicators. Okay, so for chronic absenteeism, as you know, that's going to be collected for the first time this year. Since 2 years of data are required to develop a performance indicator, there will not be one this year. And so the earliest a performance level will be reported for this indicator would be the fall of 2018, based on 16-17 and 17-18 data. The State Board, I'm just putting it out there, has talked about wanting to publish the data that comes in this year, depending on the quality, but right now they're hoping to be able to publish at least a status for chronic absenteeism this coming fall. And we are required to report chronic absenteeism data to the feds, so the 16-17 data will be reported, used for federal reporting. That's one of the new ESSA requirements. Okay, I'm going to stop there for a sec. Have there been any questions in particular yet? Nope. Okay, just let me know if there are. Okay, the second performance indicator on the dashboard is suspension rate. The suspension rates are calculated using the end-of-year certified data, the count of suspensions, as well as cumulative enrollment. This indicator we've actually developed and posted the last few years. The difference primarily being is that we've always calculated a cumulative enrollment count, but you all have never really seen that and certified that. So that's why in the end-of-year submission, there is now a cumulative enrollment report for you to certify. And so that cumulative enrollment count will be used in the calculation of the suspension rate, as well as the chronic absenteeism rate. So it's something to pay attention to. And that also highlights the importance of updating CALPADS on an ongoing basis with your students who come in and out, because that will obviously increase your denominator for these rates. The other thing you should know is the suspension rate indicator that's currently posted on the dashboard is based on pretty old data. It's 13-14 and 14-15 data. This coming November, the goal is to have that suspension rate indicator based on 15-16 and 16-17 data. Okay, the next performance indicator is the English Learner Progress Indicator, or we call it the ELPI. And this is based actually mostly on the data we get from the CELT vendor. It includes all annual CELT test takers who have at least 2 years of CELT scores. The CELT scores from the current, that's what's currently posted, come from the test vendor, and the scores from the prior year right now are what is reported by the LEA to the test vendor on the pre-ID or on the answer document. I know that sounds kind of crazy because we should have the CELT scores for all students from the prior year, but right now that's how our accountability folks are doing it. This is likely going to change because we are going to be getting a new assessment for English language learners very shortly. So this is kind of like a 1 or 2 year deal, but this is how the ELPI is being calculated, what's posted as well as in November. The other piece of data that is used for this indicator is the RFEP data, and this does come from CALPADS. And what it is the count of the redesignated, or those students who were RFEP'd in the prior school year as reflected in CALPADS. The main thing to understand is that our accountability folks are looking at a school year. So they're looking and they're counting all the students who were RFEP'd during a whole school year, basically from July 1 to June 30th. That is different from what you certify in CALPADS, which is the number of students who are RFEP'd from census day to census day. We are going to try to make these consistent by moving the CALPADS RFEP count certification to be consistent with what is used for accountability. But again, some of these changes might occur after we move to the new English language assessment. Okay, so this slide simply shows what the calculation is for the ELPI indicator. As you can see, it's the annual CELT test takers who increased at least one CELT level from 1 year to the next, plus any annual CELT test takers who maintained an early advanced or advanced proficient on the CELT, plus any English learners who were reclassified in the prior year. So that makes up the numerator, and that's divided by the total number of annual CELT takers in the current year, plus any English learners who were reclassified in the prior year.
So basically, it's primarily, this indicator is based primarily on the CELT and the performance that students have on the CELT, as well as the RFEP data. Okay, the graduation rate. I saw that there were a lot of questions and concerns about some of the changes that are going on here. So I'll try to answer them. Some things are still being fleshed out a bit. We understand the concern about having the information you need by the end of year submission. But basically, the graduation cohort in and of itself is the same in terms of how it's calculated. The only thing that is really going to change is when we use the data. So this here on this slide is just an example of what's currently will be used for this fall of 2017, which is basically the cohort for the class of 2016. So you calculate the 4-year graduation cohort rate for the class of 2017, and then you subtract that from a 3-year weighted average for the classes 3 years before, 13, 14, and 15, and that change is basically is what your performance indicator is. Either you've gone up, or you've gone down, or you've stayed the same. I know you all know this, but the graduation cohort rate has always been calculated using CALPADS ODS data. It's just that we tend to pull that data around the same times as the Fall 1 certification deadlines. But you've never really certified the graduation rate cohort. We've always displayed it to you, and then we've tried to give you a private preview. You might make changes to your data, and then we finalize the cohort rate. So what we're trying to do is, our goal is to provide the cohort rate calculation within CALPADS so that you will be able to see within CALPADS your 4-year graduation cohort within CALPADS. And we are hoping that this fall, for the class of 17, so those are the kids who are just will be graduating this June, nothing changes in terms of when you certify the 1-year grad rate, or the 1-year grad count in the fall of 2017. You will still certify that as you always will. But we hope to have a report within CALPADS that would show you the cohort, which would be the 2017 cohort, if that makes sense, within CALPADS. Then at the end of the year of the same year of 17-18, at the end of year, which would be in August, we would also pull the ODS data to develop the cohort for the class of 2018. So we're essentially doing 2 cohorts within a single year. But the goal, again, is to also have the cohort report within CALPADS, so you will be able to see the students who make up that cohort. So what that means when we make the change to using basically the end-of-year ODS data to develop the cohort, it means that for the LEAs who don't currently do this, that you need to exit your students at the end of the school year and not wait until the next fall. That's the biggest change. We understand that there are issues regarding summer grads, and there's still a little bit of discussion about whether or not the summer grads would be included in the cohort or considered a 5th-year grad. But there is tremendous pressure, basically, for us to be able to get the cohort out in that following fall. So that is the reason for that change. Are people asking a lot of questions about this?
Go to the next slide, and I think before you need to
okay.
Get through this.
Okay, and so to promote, to promote consistency, basically, the CDA, we also plan to move the certification of the 1-year graduate used for federal reporting and 1-year dropout rate to the end-of-year submission, tentatively beginning in 17-18, but that's yet to be determined for sure. But we're trying to make things consistent so that what we report to the feds, what we use for state accountability, et cetera, are all the same, so there's not confusion because we're using different time periods.
Next slide. I don't know where the stopping point is.
Oh, this is now we're moving to college and career.
Okay, so there are rapid-fire questions happening. So
I'm not surprised.
You want to pause a little bit. There was a lot of questions on the dashboard and some of the actual indicators. So let me go back a ways to find some of those questions, Paula. And again, if you guys aren't getting your question answered, please send in a service ticket because we're not able to keep up with all of these questions. And hopefully you're also paying attention to the material. And when someone views the dashboard for a district, will they know what the information they are viewing is not for the current school year? So does the dashboard indicate what time frame?
It should. I know that right now it doesn't have a year of when the data is, which is a really, it should have that, and so that's feedback that we will definitely provide and actually have already provided to our accountability office.
How will the ELPI be calculated next year with no ongoing tests?
That is to be determined. That's why how much effort you want to put in the ELPI, it's really, this is like a one-time or maybe two-time thing. They have not yet figured out the transition between the CELT and the new LPAC assessment, so that's, again, to be determined.
Some people wanted to know how they can attend the CTE mapping. Where can they get more training? Also be aware that there is CALPADS training for the end of year one, and during the end of year one course training, there will be guidance on the CTE mapping for the 16-17 year. So that's another place that you can get training.
But we're quite aware that there's a high demand for that training. We're looking at the listserv. Folks are asking for it. So Brandy actually is out on the road right now doing some training. So when she gets back, we're going to kind of try to figure out how to provide more of that.
Is there going to be a published report for cohort students? Right now we have to request one.
That's why we're hoping to put the cohort report within CALPADS. So it'll just basically be a CALPADS report like any other report where you will see your cohort rate and then be able to drill down to the students who made up that cohort rate.
Why are county offices of education schools not being included in the LTAP dashboard data, or am I misinformed?
I will need to check on that. They county offices are, we'll have to check on that. Actually, not quite sure how the county.
So send in a service ticket so we can follow up with you on that one. Is there a definition of cumulative enrollment? There is, and when you come to the staff data population training class, you will get that information, but also when we publish the updated user manual, there's an appendix for the glossary, and we will have the glossary updated with the definition of cumulative enrollment. I don't have it in front of me, so I can't tell you off the top of my head. There are two types of cumulative enrollment. One that includes overlapping enrollment in the 16-17 year, and then the adjusted cumulative enrollment is only enrollments that have a start date in the 16-17 year. I'm new to this position. How can I get access to the dashboard for my district?
You go to the CDE website, which is just cde.ca.gov, and you'll see on the home page there all these links to the to the dashboard. It's really easy to find, a lot of ways to get there.
Is there a resource for small rural schools under 30 students, total registration for the dashboard type summaries?
Is there what?
Is there a resource for the small rural schools that are less than 30?
and therefore don't have much data there on the dashboard?
Yeah.
You know, that's a good question. If you submit that as a service desk ticket, I'll send it over to our accountability folks. This does not apply to the small rules, but also just for your information, for the alternative schools, those who have traditionally been in the alternative schools accountability model or ASAM, that is, they're being developed this year. So you don't really have anything for the alternative schools right now, and they're not included in the dashboard.
And then we have somebody that wanted to remind everybody, one thing to clarify with the dashboards, they're not meant to compare schools. They're information, and the LEA uses to evaluate their individual performance. Correct, Paula?
Correct. And so, I mean, the thing about the dashboard, just to remember, the emphasis really is on continuous improvement. And it's hard to, before with the API with one number, it was really hard to determine where to improve. So the state board's, you know, belief is with these separate indicators, it will help identify areas that needs to be focused on.
So will the November 2017 dashboard use more recent data?
That's our hope. Yes. I mean, especially for the discipline data, it will, and that is why I know, you know, there's lots of concern about the cohort and upping all of that when we pull the data from the ODS, but that's the reason why. The cohort for this 2017, it won't impact that, but the next year it will. And it's likely that there has to be a baseline readjustment when we do that.
Can you mention the CCEE and the workshops they're holding around the dashboard? Is that something the coordinator should, the collaborative?
Right. You know what? Probably the best source for that is to look on our CDE website. I'm sure that all the information there is posted in terms of when they're providing the training. I don't know off the top of my head.
I think they also try to get feedback, but they can be informative. They're not detailed on how to use the dashboard, though.
Right. You actually attended one, right?
Yeah. Is the dashboard replacing DataQuest?
No, it's not. DataQuest is, hopefully that's going to get a facelift also, but you can get to the dashboard from DataQuest.
Who should be attending the direct certification workshops? The nutrition people? Yeah,
usually it's a partnership between your nutrition folks who are using your point of sale system and your CALPADS folks. A lot of the training focuses on the integration or the sharing of the data between those two, but also the training will also focus on some of the new direct certification functionality that should be coming on board soon, which is basically the new status of directly certifying students for reduced price meals.
So it doesn't teach the attendees how to get data out of CALPADS. It's more about using that data in the nutrition systems, right?
Okay.
And I think those are some of the key questions that we had.
Okay. Well, moving forward, I think I have just one more indicator to cover here, and that's the college and career indicator. The college and career indicator, the way that will work is once you know who your cohort is, say for the cohort of 2017, all the kids will be graduating this coming June, they look at all of those students and they look to see whether or not they were, prepared or not for college or career. So you're just looking at that cohort and determining basically from various data sources if they're prepared, approaching prepared, or not prepared. So the key data that will be used for the CCI, the non-CALPADS data, is whether or not passing of the AP or IB exams and scores on the Smarter, Balanced, and ELA math tests for 11th grade. The CALPADS data will be, you know, when you exit students, whether or not they met UC-CSU requirements, completion with a passing grade of an academic or CTE course that is a dual enrollment course, and we have there on the slide the specific state course codes that are considered dual enrollment, or any course that you have indicated as college credit. So they're just, basically the idea here is any student who has taken a course and received college credit for, that gives them some points. Completion of a CTE pathway is another data that is being used, and eventually they will fold in whether or not a student received the State Seal of Biliteracy or the Golden State Sealed Merit Diploma. As you know, those are being collected this year for the first time. So this is a slide that we had at the last CIM, but I'm just repeating it here because it gives you the idea of all the different ways a student can be considered. In this case, the example is being prepared for college and career. And so I think the main point to me of this slide is there's some ways you can be considered compared that doesn't even use CALPADS data, but there's multiple ways. So, and we understand that, you know, the course completion data, that data has not really been used that much, and so there might be some concerns about the quality of that data, or whether or not you have every single dual enrollment in there or whatever. But there are a lot of different ways. So, you know, I guess the point being that if it's not absolutely perfect for a cohort when the kid was a freshman in high school, that's okay. And it's probably going to be more the information from their more recent years, 11th and 12th grade, that will be used. But the main I guess message is the certification data is what's important right now. They have not yet decided whether or not it will just be certified data that they'll look at, or whether or not they'll look at ODS data. But the reality is it's going to be hard to update some of this data for course completion for prior years. So really focusing on the current year data and certifying that is probably the best way to go. So in November, this November, with the release of the dashboard, they hope to include the CCI for status only. If you notice in March, right now, if you look, there's no data for the CCI. They're looking to do just status only, and it will be based on CALPADS end of year 1 data, as well as ODS data for whether or not students met UC and CSU A to G requirements. But it's not, they haven't yet solidified exactly what they will be using for this this year. So it will mostly be to give folks an idea as to what's to come. Of all the indicators, this is the one that's going to have a lot of continued changes over the next few years as they're still trying to iron out, for example, more indicators for career ready, as well as the higher level of, I think there's another performance level of really ready, but they haven't figured that one out yet. Oh, I was wrong. There's one more indicator, and that's the academic indicators. These ones are pretty straightforward. It's basically your Smarter Balanced English Language Arts and Math scores. What's key is the CALPADS data. It's the demographic and program data that's going to be used to determine the student group, so that's where the CALPADS data becomes important. And again, when we post, or when ETS posts the summary of the Smarter Balanced scores each year, those subgroups or student groups may not be consistent with what's used for the performance indicators, because the performance indicators are going to be based on students who are continuously enrolled, and the rules they use for putting a student in a student group might be a little different. What's shown up in the testing website is what the students were right at the time of testing, whereas accountability are more likely to look over the course of the year and place a student in a particular group if they were in that group at any time during the year. And these are the student groups, which have not changed. I will note that for the foster and homeless, you will not see student group information for those two entities yet, as they're still trying to determine how best to form that student group. And finally, this summarizes for this coming fall, right now, which data will be used for the different indicators. So hopefully this provides you some focus as to what data will be used this coming fall.
So some people are reporting their audio went out. I don't know if this is widespread for everybody or just for a few folks. Yes. Let's put out there. So the same number, okay, they can hear just fine. You can continue on.
Okay.
We did have some questions, though.
I think that was it.
So I have a question on the dual enrollment and the dual enrollment codes. While there are some dual enrollment course codes in the code set, they don't have codes that include both dual enrollment and CTE or dual enrollment and AP. My question is, will they be adding to the existing dual enrollment codes or creating new ones?
No, but for any course, there's that attribute. I don't remember.
College credit.
Yeah.
Code 16, non-standard instructional setting.
Right. And there's a code that says college.
Yes, college
credit. So you can attribute that code for any particular course.
To get the
dual enrollment.
Another question, what is considered a passing grade for CCI?
I believe it's a C or better. Well, it is a C or better.
Will there be an unduplicated CCI report available in CALPADS?
Not next year. I know accountability hopes to provide some of that data as they do currently, kind of separately outside of CALPADS.
Should we be moving towards adding outside college course enrollment, like in the community colleges for students, into our course files?
That would benefit you, yes.
Is there a difference between the Office of Civil Rights dual enrollment and concurrent enrollment?
I don't know what the Office of Civil Rights...
dual enrollment?
Yeah, I don't... if you submit a service ticket, we can try and figure that one out.
How do you get the AP scores?
The department gets the AP scores from the College Board, and they do a match and get a very high match rate, so they're able to match up students with their scores. Same with IB.
So somebody said they didn't hear the dual enrollment question, and the question was, I got to go roll back and get it.
You mean about if you can have a dual enrollment if it's not one of those dual enrollment codes, right? Yes. So yes, you can. You can attribute. You can use. What's the name of it?
The non-standard instructional setting.
Is a field that you can use a code that says college credit. It's code 16, and you can attribute that to any course, and that would be counted as a dual enrollment course. Okay, so this year, though, when they do the 2017 performance indicators, it will be used by the state to identify LEAs requiring technical assistance or intervention. Again, but the focus is more in terms of assistance versus punitive, looking to ways to help LEAs improve. So that's the whole focus of the new accountability system.
So I think we caught up on most of the questions that were common to a lot of people. And again, if you didn't get your question answered, send in a service ticket so we can get you your answer. This is Martha Friedrich. I'm the Client Service Officer with FCMET CSIS, and I'm going to be doing the last half of this session regarding CALPADS support. So we've heard from the department things that are coming up and just the use of the data that you've been providing to CALPADS, and so I'm going to focus in on what is coming up in the next submission. But first, I got to get my mouse to work. Oh, who's doing it? Oh. I'm not watching the screen. Okay. I'm going from machine to machine. I got to get my fingers adjusted. Okay. The topics I'm going to cover is just quickly talk about the fall submissions statistics, go into the end-of-year planning that you guys should be thinking about, the changes that are going to happen in the end-of-year submissions, and then talk a little bit about closing out the 16-17 enrollments and the change that's going to happen to the SCNR file layout, and then our usual support tips. So, as Karen mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, she gave also the status of the fall submission. Here's the actual numbers. We had the initial deadline in fall 1. Not everybody made it there by the December deadline, but everybody made it by the February deadline. Fall 2 didn't have the initial, and we almost got everybody to certify fall 2, but we were missing 6 LEAs, so we're shooting for 100% with end of year, folks. So thank you for that hard work, because we know it was a lot with the fall 2. And the more that you are aware of these dates and you can plan around them, the more successful that you will be. So end of year is going to, the end of year submissions, end of year 1, end of year 2, and end of year 3 all happen at the same time, and the system will begin generating the snapshots on May 15th. And then the initial deadline is going to be July 31st. And then there's only going to be a 2-week window for amendments. So it's going to be really, really important for the folks in the districts and independent charter schools that you plan extremely well, because these submissions and deadlines happen during the summertime where some of your administrators might not be around to check and verify data or even certify. So if they're going to be gone, you're going to want to move up your timelines of completing the submission so that the people that need to see the data and certify it are going to be around to do so. And if these dates should change, we have the URL here to check the calendar for CALPADS. So end of year 2 basically collects some program records that you haven't been giving to us all year. There's some that we report to the feds, so a handful. You've been providing us SPRG programs all throughout the year, but there's these particular program records you may not have given to us. So you're going to want to send up the SPRG file with those additional program records so that we can generate the end of year 2 reports. It also collects the or generates the report for homeless students, and so you want to be sure you look at that closely. Past few years, the counts of homeless students have dropped because we switched from collecting it from the residents' data to an actual program record, and so you want to pay close attention to your homeless reports and make sure you are tagging those kids appropriately. End of year 3 used to be just about discipline, but this year we are adding in the absence summary data collection, as well as we're going to generate your cumulative enrollment reports. And so the cumulative enrollment, you're not necessarily giving us a specific file because it's based on the enrollment that's already in CALPADS. And so if you don't have all of your enrollment in CALPADS, you're going to want to update CALPADS with the SCNR file to be sure we have all of your enrollment so we can calculate and provide an accurate cumulative enrollment. So end of year 3, you definitely have to send up the discipline file for the discipline records, and then the staff file, which is the student's absence summary file, and that's the new one that has been implemented or will be ready on May 9th. The next submission is end of year 1, and that's the course completion and career tech ed. This slide helps people to focus on what do you do first, second, and third. And so we've always recommended that you start with end of year 2, partly because every school, all students need to be accounted for in end of year 2 as well as end of year 3. And so if you can get end of year 2 done and out of the way, you're well positioned to be successful with end of year 3, making sure you had all of your enrollment, et cetera. And then finally, you can work on end of year 1. So if people are asking, what do you do first or second, this is our suggestion. Doesn't mean you have to do it that way. If you start off with end of year 1, you may get a lot more validation errors because you may not have all of your SCNR data updated or your CIM data updated, so it makes sense to start with end of year 2. I'm on slide 55, and slide 55 is suggested milestones. Knowing that you have an initial deadline of July 31st, we've put here what are some of the key milestones that you have to accomplish in order to successfully hit that deadline. And if you need to get certified before that deadline, you can see how many days we've allotted for some of these milestones, and so you can shorten those days if you need to get done sooner. So if you were starting today and wanted to get all your data population ready prior to us starting the end of year submission, right before we start generating the snapshot reports, you have 18 days to complete all of your data population such that your snapshot reports will have all of your data in them. But if you can't get it all done, just know when snapshots start running on May 15th, they may be incomplete because you haven't finished all of your data population and nor have you updated all of your data. So from May 15th through June 16th, which is about, middle of June where most schools are out, you have 25 days. So again, if you want to get those files up sooner so you can start looking at reports sooner, you can't spend 25 days uploading files. Maybe you want to give yourself 1 or 2 days, which means you have to have all of your data population done. So these are suggestions, and you have to adjust them accordingly. Between June 16th and June 30th, we give you 10 days to send out reports and give people time to review them. And then you got to make more adjustments to it. So from 6/30 to July 14th, there's 10 days to get other people to look at it after you've cleaned things up. And then you got another 11 days between July 14th and July 31st to get it certified. So these are just suggestions. Please adjust accordingly based on who's available and when you guys got to get things done. So hopefully this will be helpful to folks. If you need help strategizing and figuring out how you can cram a whole lot more in, send in a service ticket. We're happy to work with you and help you strategize to be successful. Slide 56 is our usual slide. No matter how many times we show this to you, we still have people that tend to wait till the very end. And when you wait till the very end, system performance gets worse than it is at the beginning of the submission. So by the middle of July, things are going to start really slowing down. So if you don't want to be in that time frame where it takes a really long time to get results back, you want to use the system a whole lot sooner, which means data population has to get done sooner. The uploading of your files have to get done sooner. Slide 57, just some basics. How do you prepare for end of year? You got to make sure your SIS is updated. Now, with this end of year submission, there is a new file type that has to be submitted. And so you're going to need to work closely with your student information system vendor to be sure you have the updated software that will allow you to generate the staff extract file. And also, on May 9th, we are changing the SCNR file type to have those two new fields, the biliteracy and the golden seal. And so you definitely want to work closely with your SIS vendor and coordinate the timing of getting that SCNR file type, so on May 9th, your file won't be rejected because you don't have the latest and greatest, and that you can start submitting your attendance data with the staff. So working with your SIS vendor, very important. With the addition of the new file, and that functionality is going to also require some additional roles that have to be set up, so you want to plan ahead of time for that as well. The roles and the file formats, those things aren't going to change until May 9th, and so you can start preparing for it, but you can't actually take action on it until that release goes in on May 9th. And we'll do more communication to the field to remind everybody about when that switch is going to happen, so it's not just this meeting and this conversation that you're going to hear about it. Item number 2, updating the ODS, the operational data store. The only way that CALPADS can provide you information is when you upload it to us and post it. So you got to submit the records, you got to address the validation errors, and then you got to post the records so that the ODS has your most up-to-date information. And after you get the data into the ODS, then it's time to review the snapshot data, address any certification errors that may come along, as well as some warnings, and I'll speak to that later in some slides. And then the last step is you got to certify. So it looks real simple, 4 steps, but there's a lot of work that goes on. So you want to definitely spend some time planning so that you can hit those milestones. Slide 58, local planning. This is in regards to end of year 2. This happens every year. We probably get, 50 or so, 100 LEAs that are unaware that they have to make sure that the consolidated application reporting system is updated in regards to their Title I status, because we do collect the school-wide and targeted school-wide programs. That's part of the program records that we collect in end of year 2. And so you have to have CARs updated properly, because there is some cross-checking that CALPADS will do with the data that has been certified in CARs. And so if you don't get that done first, you're not going to have accurate information in CALPADS, and it will prevent you from certifying. So you definitely want to take care of the consolidated application reporting system and your Title I status. Locally, you want to meet with staff and talk about all of these things that need to get populated with the addition of those 2 new fields in the SCNR file. Not that you have to have it right away, but you're going to want to, when you're done exiting all of your 16, 17 students, you want to be sure those that achieve the golden seal and the biliteracy are flagged appropriately. So you got to work with local staff in that regards. You should probably take a look at what happened last year, and if there was any areas that you can improve upon, you would want to work with your team locally and figure out how you can overcome those obstacles that you had last year so that you can get through end of year a little bit easier this time. You definitely want to communicate with your sites of things that are needed. The fact that we've added in the absence summary, you're going to want to talk to all of your sites and let them know that you may be coming back to them and they may have to make some adjustments to their attendance data. I don't know, but it's yet another collection that you've not seen before, so you want to be sure that your sites are aware that this data is being collected. You may want to run some reports locally, make sure all the fields are populated, so that you can have accurate information on those extracts. You want to determine who's going to review that submission data. There's 3 different types of data, actually probably 5 different types of data. You got program data, you got discipline data, you have absence summary data, you have course completion data, you have CTE data. That's a lot of data, and it's not just one person that needs to look at it or provide answers to you. So you want to coordinate and know who you will be working with for those various collections. And you want to be aware, are they going to be around for the whole time that you're doing your end-of-year submission? Or are they leaving the last day of school such that you have to get all of that information in and up to date with them, with those folks reviewing it before they take off? So a lot of local planning goes into having a successful end-of-year submission. You want to, you can upload program and discipline data now. You can use the ODS reports for that, but just keep in mind, we are not keeping the ODS reports up to date, but they can be helpful as just an initial gauge of, you know, are your numbers in the ballpark? So don't rely on them as your official numbers, but they get you in the ballpark because snapshots aren't going to start running until May 15th. There is no ODS reports for the absence summary data, so that you do have to wait for snapshots. But if you want to start looking at some discipline data or some the program data, homeless data, you can run the ODS reports on that. More local planning. Try to get reports either locally or from CALPADS and show people that need to see it and see if you're in the ballpark or if there's something really missing in the system. Be sure you come to end-of-year training this year because of the changes with the absence summary. We did some big changes with end-of-year 1 and the CTE data, and so you're going to want to learn about those changes, so it is important to come to training. We have an advanced class as well as a basic staff data population class, so there's something for everybody there. The expected schools report is helpful to look at because that indicates which of your schools are expected to report. So if you're not sure, you can run those reports and it will tell you. Everybody has to certify end of year 2. Everybody has to certify end of year 3. Even if you don't have any discipline records, you have to certify it, and then you would be certifying that you have 0 discipline data. Everybody, and end of year 3 now also has the absence summary, and so everybody's going to have students that are going to have attendance records that will be in there. Attend our Q&As if you like. There's a lot of Q&A happening in this CIM, and so those folks that have a lot of questions, you are good candidates to come to our Wednesday afternoon Q&A session. You can register and come to the class. I think we cap it at like 30 people, but it's a nice way to just have a dialogue and an interaction with the support staff. So you're welcome to register. It's on the CAASPP website, the training page, where you'll see the class. So now on slide 60, I'm going to go into the end-of-year submission changes. But before I do that, I'm going to pause and see if there's some questions that we have to answer.
And you might have answered some of these, but there's some number of questions about training on staff and end-of-year training and so forth. Okay. So we added a new class this year for the end of year. It's called End of Year 3 Staff Data Population, because everybody, even if you've been doing end of year for 5 years, everybody's going to need to know about what's involved in the staff's data collection. So we created a separate course just for the staff's data population. Probably last hour and a half to 2 hours. Then we have an advanced class that covers end of year 2, 3, and 1. So it's a brief, you know, people that have been doing it for a long time, we just kind of go over quickly what the changes are because you know how to do everything. We don't go into great detail on any kind of data population in the advanced class. We have a regular end of year 2 and 3 class that does just that. It talks about the details of what it takes to certify end of year 2 and what's being collected in end of year 2 as well as in end of year 3. It includes the collection of the staff's data, but we don't repeat what we have in the data population class. We just basically say end of year 3 is collecting 2 things, discipline and attendance summary, actually 3 things, the cumulative enrollment. And then we
highlight the key things that you have to know about those data collections, and then we go over the certification reports and the certification process in end of year 2, 3. There's a separate class for end of year 1 that will go into great detail about career tech ed and course completion. So all of those courses are on the course page at the CSIS website. We have already posted some classes. When they fill up, we'll add more, so don't worry. We will keep adding courses until everybody gets trained. We will be sending out the announcement to everybody shortly. Today. So the classes are there on that page. You can click on the course catalog, and it has a description of all of the courses, so hopefully that covered that question more than you wanted to know. Anything else, Paula?
That's good to know.
Okay, so slide 60. Oh, a lot of changes to validations. This slide right here is not specific to end of year. It's more specific to a file type. So when we add in these 2 new fields, the biliteracy and the golden seal, there will be a validation for each one of those fields. So in this case, SENR 0315, if you populate that field, it's expecting that you have a school completion status of 100. So if you don't have a school completion status code of 100, then we're not going to allow you to say, put a value in that field, or Y value. The SENR 0316 is for the seal of biliteracy, and again, you have to have a school completion status code of 100 in order to populate that field with a Y. So that's what those 2 validations are for. And it's on May 9th when we're going to change the file format, and then these validations are going to be active. The last validation on slide 60 is the discipline 0312. This is a new fatal. We had an inflated count of removal to interim alternative setting in last year's collection, more than we should have, so I think it was a misunderstanding of the use of that field. And so now we are going to get a little bit stricter with the use of that field. And if the student is not special ed, you cannot populate this field. And so you will get a fatal error if you're trying to indicate this student has a removal to an interim alternative setting when they're not special ed. Only special ed students can use this, and when you use this field, it should be very rare. I mean, you should probably only have like 5 kids at the most that use this field. So if you had a lot of kids, then you need to go back and take a look at what your practices are, because this removal to an interim alternative setting is not for everybody. And when you come to training, we will go over all of the validations, or the common ones, in end of year 2, 3, and 1. And by the way, the self-pace, a lot of changes happened in end of year 1 as well as in end of year 3, and so we are going to re-record the self-pace, and so we're likely going to take down the existing self-pace because they're out of date. We need to deliver a few of the courses before we begin our recording, so we'll let you know when the self-pace get updated and posted. So in the meanwhile, you need to come to our training classes. Slide 61, here's some new certification validations for end of year 2. Notice that these have a W, which means they're warnings. So little by little, we're bringing the warnings back into your certifications. As you experienced previously, we weren't doing any of the warnings, but we're starting to bring them in. So for end of year 2, we want to check on the TK program records, checking the dates on them, and so you will get a warning if it's crossing academic years, it hasn't been closed outright, or if it's opened and it's crossing the academic year. So we're going to give you some feedback on that. We're going to warn people that you don't have any homeless data, because sometimes it's okay, but most of the time you should have, or you may have had it in the past, and so we're going to warn you that you're missing it. So we want you to just double check. This year, are you really sure you have no homeless students to report? And then CERT 073 is a warning, and I apologize, I don't have what the warning is, but we're including program, the TK program in that warning subset. On slide 62, this is a brief summary on one slide of all of the changes that are, major changes that are happening to ND Year 3. The first thing is we're changing the title of ND Year 3. ND Year 3 just used to be known as the discipline submission, and it's not that anymore. It is including the absence summary, the cumulative enrollment, and discipline. So if it took you 2 months to do your discipline submission last year, you're going to want to address that duration because you have more data to report and you can't take 3 months to get it done. You basically have 2 months, 2.5 months to get end of year 3 done. And so you got to plan well in advance to make that deadline. The expected school report has been updated to include who is expected to have cumulative enrollment, which schools, which grades, as well as the absence summary, which schools and grades are expected to report absence summary. So the expected schools report has 2 additional columns under end of year 3 now. We've added the data collection for the student absence summary, and when we do that, that means you get a new file type called staff. You have new security roles for accessing the staff data. You need a role for batch, you need a role for online, you need a role to look at rejected records, you need a role to look at reports, and I believe level 1 certifier. Could be wrong. It's in the actual training class, the different roles that you'll need. We have a bunch of validations because as you upload a file, we have to look at those elements and be sure there's reasonability. So there's going to be a handful of new input validation rules for end of year 3. So you're not going to be able to move quickly through that unless you have quality data. We're going to modify the user interface. When we add a new file, then there's a new batch template, then there's a new file that you can upload, and then there's a new file for online maintenance, accessing the absence summary data. So all of those things are going to change. We go into greater detail, and we show you all of those things in the training class. In the staff data population, you will be exposed to all of those changes. I'm just giving you a summary of here's what's happening so that you guys can make sure you come to training and you got heads up on what's coming around the corner. And then we're adding new certification reports to end of year 3. So more than just the discipline reports, you got report 1.21, which is the cumulative enrollment report, and then there's report 14.1. And these are both aggregate reports, and they have supporting detail reports that go along with them. So there's quite a few reports for end of year 3 to certify now, which means you got to review them, somebody's got to okay them before you can get certified. So on slide 63, I am presenting here the various staff validations. Anytime we create a new file format, we have the standard validations that we do, checking the format, checking that you got valid codes, etc. So there's a GER 01, a GER 05, the format 01. So those are the generic IVRs. And if your vendor implemented it correctly, you won't have any of those errors. Then we go into validating the individual fields in the staff file, and they're all fatal. So if you don't get it right, you're not going to have all of your records updated in CALPADS. There is a element, a field in the file that allows a student to be flagged with an exempt indicator. And again, this shouldn't be used very often, and it's meant for use at an MPS school and home hospital. If you populate a student with the exemption indicator, then no other fields can be populated. So if you have that populated and you accidentally put something in another field, you're going to get the staff 303 because you can't have anything else populated because you're saying the student is exempt. And likewise on staff 304, if the student is not exempt and you're missing something in one of the other fields, you're going to get an error, because if they're not exempt, then all of the other fields need to be populated. So those are some basic validation rules in the use of that indicator. Staff 305, we are going to be doing some math. Your expected attendance days, we're going to compare other fields to that expected attendance days. So if you tell us that you're expecting the student to be with you for 100 days, and then you tell us that they had 105 days that they attended, there's something wrong with the math there, and we're going to generate a validation on it, because you can't have more days attended than what you expected. And again, your SIS vendor is aware of all of these fields, and they are preparing the ability to generate these extracts, and they'll be doing some of this math for you. You just have to have good data in your SIS. So you got to do some audits on your local data. Staff 307, if you put a value in out, or if you have some students with an out-of-school suspension, it can't exceed expected attendance days or days attended, et cetera. So we're just doing some cross-checking for reasonability. And on it goes with 308, 309, 310, and 311. These are fields that you are providing a value in, and we're making sure that it's a reasonable field compared to expected days or days attended. On the bottom of slide 64 is staff 314. A student should not have multiple staff records for the same school. If a student goes from school to school, you can have a record for each school. We may not count them all the time at the LEA level. There will be an unduplicated count. And again, when you come to training, we will go over this in more detail. Staff 313, the exemption is only, it's a warning, and if you're using that exemption indicator, we're going to let you know that you applied it to a student that wasn't at an MPS school or wasn't a homeschool student. So we're giving you a heads up that maybe you need to take a look at this, because the expectation is all students should be able to report absent summary data. There's rare occasions when it's not appropriate, but the majority of kids should have it. So if you're getting any 313 warnings, you're going to want to take a look at those kids and figure out why. On slide 65 are certification validations. There's a handful of those as well. So we're going to check to be sure that if you report a kid, a student, with an in-school suspension, and you tell us that the kid has 1 day or 2 days, we're going to look for a discipline record for that student in CALPADS. And if the student doesn't have a discipline record, we're going to alert you to the fact that you got something wrong with your data. So if you're going to report in-school suspension and even out-of-school suspension, we're expecting to see a discipline record. So that's one reason there's a sequence here with end of year 3 that you want to get your discipline data in before you start looking at your absence summary certification validations here. If you report an absence summary record for a student and there's no enrollment for the student, we're going to flag that. There's something wrong with that as well. So any kid that is in your absence summary file should have an SENR record for that school. And if not, then we're going to generate the CERT 126. And I talked about 127. If a student is enrolled in your school and you have updated CALPADS with the SENR enrollment record, we're going to look to see that you submitted an absence summary record for that student. And if you didn't, then you get a CERT 128. And then the last one, the expected attendance days is greater than the total enrollment days. So we are going to do some math to make sure you have things, again, reasonable. So you can see here a lot of validations, input, as well as certification for the end of year 3 staff file. No, there's still more. Gosh. Slide 66, the CERT 1, you have an open school, but you haven't given us any data for the school. You've seen that before. Cert 112, we are going to start checking to be sure that previous year enrollment, not the 16-17 year, but the 15-16, that you have closed them all out. You'd be surprised what happens between fall 1 and end of year, that people accidentally update their enrollment records inside of CALPADS, and it changes the quality of the data. So Cert 112 is going to look to be sure that you have all your previous academic years. So again, the previous academic year is 15-16 because you're reporting 16-17 year now. Cert 85 is a warning, letting you know that we're missing an expulsion or discipline record for a student. Cert 86, not sure what the difference is. These titles are almost the same. Come to training. We'll teach you more about them. Cert 130, removal to the interim alternative setting for non-special educations. If a student somehow you updated it previously before our validations got in, we may find some kids that are not special ed and they have an alternative, interim alternative setting populated. We're going to generate the Cert 130. So on slide 67 is the summary of changes for end of year 1. I'm going to pause and see if there's any questions on the end of year 3 validations.
No, but there's just a lot of questions regarding training again, and I guess some concern that they can't always get signed up on the website, the FCMAT website. It times out, and so they don't know what to do when they can't get registered.
So what we experience, usually the first day that we announce that we have training, everybody hits that website and it doesn't do well under that high demand. So if you're not successful in accessing it, in the first 2 hours, give it 3 hours. Try tomorrow morning. It usually gets better, so just keep trying. And if after maybe 2 days you still can't get in, then send in a service ticket. We will be monitoring the courses, and if they fill up, we'll keep adding more. So just keep, coming back, and we'll get you in. We're not going to not train you. We want to have everybody have the opportunity for training.
Could you also repeat, if you said these, the dates when the new staff file will be available, as well as the new enrollment file? And there was a question about when new roles would be available, but I'm not sure.
Okay. So we have scheduled a release to go into CALPADS on May 9th. And prior to that, we will be sending out communications to the field to remind everybody that on May 9th, CALPADS will change the SENR file type and add in those 2 new elements. And on May 9th, any SENR file that's not been completed, it's going to be abandoned, because on May 9th, the system's going to start taking action on that new file format, the SENR with the 2 additional fields. Also on May 9th is the release for the STAS file. It becomes active on that day. But we won't start generating reports for your STAS data until the submission starts, which is May 15th. So May 9th is when the release goes in, and that's when some of the file format changes happens.
And on May 9th, they could assign the new admin role for STAS.
Yes. Yes. And we'll talk more about that in the training. You'll receive a communication. We'll probably put it in the flash because you have to do some coordination locally and making sure that if you need SSIDs, you may want to get it before May 9th. You don't want to be caught with the file halfway done because, as I said, on May 9th, we will abandon any SENR files that are in progress and not completed.
There was a question about the certification program or the recognition program?
Yes. We do the recognition program at the end of year submission. We wait for all of the submissions to be done before we do the data management recognition. And at the same time, then we look to see training-wise who are the people that have now completed all of the training requirements. So that usually happens. We start looking at it, well, if the deadline is August 11th and we're done with the end of year, So September, October, we'll put out the certificates for the recognition for the 16-17 year. Okay, slide 67, end of year. So you've heard a lot about us talking and the changes with the career tech ed courses. So the first thing is we're changing the definition of a CTE course. Last year it was very narrow and it had to be a 4,000 through 5,000 course. This year it's still the 4,000 through 5,000, but there's 24 courses that are flagged as an academic CTE course. But last year we excluded the ROP courses. We're not going to do that. So the definition changed and the business rules are now looking at more courses. We've added a new report, aggregate report, as well as a supporting report. In the past, report 3.14 had your non-concentrators and as well as concentrators and completers. What we've done in the 16-17 school year is we've moved the non-concentrators out of report 314 and created its own report just for non-concentrators, just because it's handled slightly differently than the concentrators and completers. So it made sense to have its own report. So you will have a new report to certify, which is 317. We've modified 314 and 315. One, we took away the non-concentrators. So 314 and 315 are just about concentrators and completers. We've added some new filters, and these filters are going to be very important to the folks that are Perkins and CTEIG fundable, because all courses are going to be on the reports if you ask for all types. But if you want to just see what are the students that are the Perkins and CTEIG fundable, you have to be sure that you have the filter set correctly so you can identify those students. So come to training so you can learn about the changes in the reports, or you just figure it out on your own on May 15th. We replaced the pathway filter. In the direction that we're moving now with CTE, it made more sense to filter on the industry sector. And like I said, 314 includes the concentrators and completers only. In addition, the business rules for report 314 is going to use the pathway that's in the SCTE file. Before it was using it, I'm not sure where, but it wasn't using it from the SCTE, and so now it's going to. And so that may be a different shift for some folks that they're not used to. And in addition, the course completion record, the CRSC, has to map to a course code within the pathway in the SCTE. So we're going to do a cross-check. If you give us a SCTE record, that pathway also has to be in one of the course completion records that you send up. So our end of year one training will go over these changes in more detail for folks. This is just a summary of what's coming. Slide 68, we've modified some of the certification validations. Some are warnings and we modified them. So we got 4 warnings that we have now in end of year one. I think we had them for, before, but Cert 116 is a fatal. This is new because we've changed the art and the ag industry sector, and so for those, we're doing an additional check that if you're going to tell us that a student is a CTE concentrator in the art or ag, we need to have the appropriate records for that. So you get a Cert 116. Continuation of the Cert 1 validations. We disabled Cert 117. We added Cert 122. And here's where we're checking in the course code sets. There are some new course codes that were introduced in July of 2016, so they've been there throughout, and you were made aware of them when you were submitting your Fall 2 course enrollment data. But there's going to be a validation that if you are indicate, or you want to indicate that a student is a concentrator in the art or ag, you have to select that specific course that indicates it's a concentrator type course. And in addition, I think we're also looking, if you're going to tell us they're a completer, that we need a capstone course, just specifically in the art and the ag industry sectors. Those were the first two ones that we are modifying. Next year, all of the industry sectors are going to be revamped. But we're moving forward with exposing you to the changes with art and ag for this school year. So a lot to be paid attention to here. So folks that are doing CTE, you want to get an early start and take a look at this data and get it in sooner rather than later. And so if you're telling us that they're a CTE completer, we have to be sure that you give us a SCSC record that indicates that they took a capstone in the art and ag. So. Slide 70. So now I'm done talking about the changes in the various end-of-year submissions, a summary of those changes, and if you want to know more, you got to come to our training. On slide 70, I want to just talk briefly about enrollment records in CALPADS. And as Paula was mentioning in her section about our goal to move towards collecting the grads and dropouts in an end-of-year submission, it's not happening now. It's not happening in the 16-17 year, but it's good practice that as you end a school year, that CALPADS is also updated and knows about the students that have exited and how they exited. So you don't want to do it before May 9th, because for those students that have a completion code of 100, you want to take advantage of those new elements and flag them as being biliterate or the golden seal. So when you're ready to close out your enrollments, your 16-17 enrollments, it's good practice to do it sooner rather than later. You can wait till the end of year submission is done, or you could do it when school ends and it's appropriate at that time. Be aware that when you exit kids out of CALPADS, there are the activity where we do an auto close of certain program records, and the data guide has documented which program records are auto closed. So that's a good resource for folks. If you have any questions about what program records are auto closed, it's documented very well in the data guide, and I think it was also recently updated in regards to the TK programs. You want to work closely with your SIS vendor on closing your enrollment records and the end-of-year submission extracts. It shouldn't impact those extracts, but you should consult with them to be sure. Know that when you do exit students, direct cert will include the E-155s. On July 1, when we start a new school year, any student that has the E-155, we will still pull them out and get direct cert results for the new school year. So you want to include closing out enrollment records, a plan for that, make sure everybody at your sites know how important it is to have accurate exit codes for students and to get it done sooner rather than later. And you're going to find out that it's going to make more sense when you're looking at your cumulative enrollment that you got up-to-date data in CALPADS in that regard. On slide 71, this slide came out of the data guide, Appendix C, where we have all of the exit codes, and this is a reminder to folks. In particular, there's 4 exit codes, and when you use these 4 exit codes, it's very important that you have official written documentation on the use of those exit codes. It should be any exit codes that, indicates the kid's gone, not coming back, that you should have written documentation. But this is a reminder of what is examples of official written documentation and the expectation that the state has that you are following the regulations, and it is in ed code that you need to have official written documentation on the whereabouts of students, and that helps informs, and producing accurate dropout and graduate rates. So it's important that you guys pay attention to this. You may want to bring it to your administrator's attention, your registrars, or the folks that do data entry and exiting kids, that how important it is to collect this documentation, because if you're audited, it you're going to have to, you may be asked to show, well, how did you know the student left and went out of state? And you need to be able to produce the documentation that indicated such. So slides 72 and 73 have the 4 codes that are really important that you have official written documentation. If a student goes, transfers to a private school, it's, this comes right out of the glossary that is in the data guide. So when you use the T180 for transferring to a private school, we'd like to see written. You locally have to keep the official written documentation of that transfer to a private school, as well as when you use a T200, transferring to a private U.S. school outside of California, public or private U.S. school outside of California. And then on slide 73, exit code 240, that they transferred out of the country, or T460, which is they transferred to a home school. So those 4 codes, it's important. Kids, if you're using those codes, you want to be sure you locally have official written documentation. You keep it somewhere. If you don't have policies and procedures around this, you're going to want to get that set up because the auditors may be looking for it. Slide 74. So you're going to find that we are moving towards making folks more aware of data security, privacy, confidentiality. And so we've had the slide 74, in our presentations for several years now, and we want to keep iterating the responsibility of the LEA administrator. And it's important for this person that has that role to look and review all of the accounts that are established for the LEA and make sure that they're still active and you have the appropriate documentation and that these people have a need to know and that they're using the system accordingly. So we, the state, CDE, provides you with this account, but with that account comes tremendous responsibility, and so it's up to you to be sure that you are aware of who has accounts in your system and they have a need to know. And we're going to continue to provide training and understanding of student data privacy and security confidentiality issues. We're going to create a new session for you. The LEA administrator application is being updated to make folks aware of what your responsibilities are. But within CALPADS itself, you have the ability to generate a report. You can check out who's got what roles. You really want to pay attention to who has access to foster, direct cert, national school lunch programs, as special ed, and make sure that they have a need to know. And so you're going to want to work with your administrators, and you may have to ratchet back some of the folks that have access because, you know, early on maybe everybody just got it, and now you have to have a need to know in order to use some of these roles. So I'm not going to cover all of these points on slide 74. On slide 75 is our usual support tips. Before I keep going, Paula, are there any other questions?
No, just a lot of questions about the documentation that's required. We don't have too much more to add than what is in the
I think we are
in the data guide, but
we are updating the data guide.
Yeah.
We're going to add the staff to the data guide. That'll come out probably before May 9th.
The bottom line is, I mean, a lot of the questions relate to if there is a written letter or something from a parent, whether that's enough. I mean, that's certainly better than not having anything. And we also understand that often what happens is, you know, the parent might take an official transcript with them because they don't really know what school the student might be enrolling in. So, you know, I think the bottom line is if you have something, just maintain that documentation. Obviously, the best is a request from another school from outside the state, but you know, we know that doesn't always happen.
So I'm going back to slide 75. Support tips. For those of you that have been around for a while, know how to expedite your service ticket. You can get some of your answers in the known issues. Folks that have an account in CALPADS should be working with their LEA admin. We have now 1,850 plus LEAs, and so it makes it hard for the service desk to respond to more than 1,800 tickets. And so if you have an account, you need to work with your LEA admin, ask them questions. If they don't know the answers, then the LEA admin should be contacting the service desk. You should configure your security questions so that if you need a password reset, you can do that yourself so long as you have security questions on file. To contact the service desk, you can use the email or the web form. We prefer the web form because we get more complete information, but email works. That's better than the phone, so those are the preferred. And when you do contact us and you have a question about a record that you just uploaded or a file that you uploaded, giving us a job number, question about a specific statewide student identifier, all we need is the number. Do not give us a name. Do not give us anything else about that SSID. Just the number is adequate, similar to the staff educator ID. We just need the number. We can get the rest of the info. And then what error number that you're struggling with and that you need help on. The validation number helps us, and we can research it before we get back to you. And here on Site 76 are your training opportunities. So we have all kinds of courses, basic courses, advanced courses. Again, the self-paced, we got to get updated for end of year. They're not ready yet. We had to first get the regular training material up to date, and we're starting our training this week with the staff population and the advanced end of year class. Eventually, we will start on the regular end-of-year 2-3 reporting and certification training as well as end-of-year 1. We can't do all the trainings all at once, so we're starting with staff population so people are prepared for that. And then the advanced users, we wanted you to be aware of the summary of changes. And then for folks that need help on everything, those will start the beginning of May. So in April, it's the data population and advanced users only. It benefits you as an individual to have an account on our website if you want to get credit for the training that you attend. If you sign up for training as a guest, then it makes it hard for us to give you credit because we don't know who you are because you signed in as a guest. So if you create an account, we can track your training attendance a little bit easier. On slide 77 are the support resources. The valid code combos are going to be very critical for end of year 1 in the Career Tech Ed with the Ag and Art, so that you can see what courses are valid for the art and the ag industry sectors with the retired codes that we did. There's a really nice, easy way to find those available codes in the valid code combos. Release updates. So on May 9th, when a new release goes in, that will document all of the changes and some fixes that get done, and that usually takes a few days after the release before that gets published. We will be publishing a new error list because we have a lot more validations now that we've added that new file type and a couple of new elements. And then there's a lot more certification validations as well. The flash updates, we'll be sending out probably a couple of more before end of year is done. Definitely one about the change in the application process, and then another one about changing the SCNR file type and the coordination of that. The data guide, another excellent resource, got a lot of information in there, and it will be updated to incorporate the changes with the staff file. Self-paced training modules, they're out there. Again, we got to get the end-of-year ones up to date, so just be aware they're not ready to go. And then the glossary will be updated, and that's in the back of the user manual. And you can get to the user manual from CDE's website, their system, CALPADS system documentation page, or you can get it when you're inside, logged in CALPADS. You can go to the help menu, and you can get to the user manual there. And then the FAQs. So we got a lot of FAQs we need to add for this upcoming year, and we'll continue to, that'll be an ongoing process for us. So on slide 78, if you liked what you heard today, it'd be nice to hear from you. Let us know if we're doing a good job, or if you'd like to see some improvements on how we conduct the CIM. let us know via this survey. And I think most people can't get to that short survey, that you got to use that the long one right here. So hopefully they'll put that in the Q&A, and we'd really like to get feedback from you guys on our survey so that we can continue to make these presentations beneficial to you guys. Any questions before we end?
Well, there are a lot of questions regarding the documentation for those exit codes, and so we will try to put out some more guidance, within a flash.
So I'm going to jump real quick to the next slide just so that you're aware of when we're meeting next. So our next CIM is in the fall, and it's scheduled for October 17th, and we'll continue to do the WebEx sessions. And then in October, we'll tell you when the next one is. It's usually in April. So I'm back on slide 78 with our survey. So if you can get that survey filled out, that would be great. So keep an eye out for upcoming flashes. Make sure you get signed up for training. Send in the service ticket if you have any questions that we didn't answer, and keep up the good work. We appreciate the effort that you guys are putting into this, and we want to help you be successful in meeting these timelines.
There's a question about any news on deadlines for 17-18. Shortly, we will publish those in a flash. It says, please repeat the date for the fall CIM.
October 17th. Oh, it doesn't change easily.
There's a note that please, this happened before, that 10/17 is the Great Shake Day, so it makes it hard to attend.
I thought we checked, and it wasn't the Great Shakeout Day. I was pretty sure that we checked the calendar. So we'll double check. It's called Shakeout, I think.
And yes, we will be updating the CALPADS calendar with some of the accountability dates and the dates that we have published here in the CIM. The survey link points to last year's.
Isn't that nice? Well, we can send out a listserv message with the link for you guys. Yeah. I mean, if it's active, you could put it in there, and we'll know that you put your response in from today.
Someone checked, and the shakeout drill is scheduled for October 19th, so we're good for the 17th. Thank you.
Thank you for confirming that.
Yeah,
much appreciated.
Is that the publication of the documentation? We'll have the PowerPoint up shortly, but we have to do the transcription of the recording, and that takes about between 3 weeks and a month before we have that available, so we'll have all of that posted at the same time.
I'm not sure if you could hear Karen from that far away. So the PowerPoint that we use for the CIM is on our website under the CIM registration. The quick links page there has the PowerPoint. When CDE publishes it, it needs to be transcribed, and that will happen in about a month or so, and then it will be published on CDE's website. So if you want the PowerPoint now, you have to go to CSIS's website, but in a month we'll announce when it gets transcribed, and then it will be posted on CDE's website.
Yes. Well, there is one question about administrators, and we need one application per administrator. So if you have 2 administrators, we'll need 2 applications. If you have 1 LEA CALPADS administrator, only 1 application.
Okay, so if we didn't answer your question, send in a service ticket, We hope you guys have a successful end of year, and we look forward to seeing you guys all make the deadline of July 31st. Have a great week. Bye.